great to see everybody. Welcome to the Vicki and Carl Zeiger Insight Seminar, and tonight we'll be talking about House of India. So thank you. Are Vicki and Carl here? I would love to acknowledge them if they are. I don't see them. Well, they've been supporting this program for many years, and we are indebted to them for their support. Very excited about tonight. I say that all the time. I know you know that. These two next to me have become my friends over the course of now, let's see, maybe a little over a year that we've been talking and working together. So excited to introduce them. So I'll start with our playwright, Deepak Kumar.
Hello.
So Deepak, he also was part of the writing team for Baked, the musical. I'll clue you in on it's not about baked goods. You can talk about that later. And he's been commissioned by the Audible Theater and by Arena Stage. He's also a MacDowell Colony Fellow. He's participated as a Eugene O'Neill Theater Center National Playwrights Conference. He was part of Musical Theater Factory Makers 3 cohort. And this is a fun thing about him. And I believe you may be the first PhD in computer science to produce a play at the Old Globe.
It's possible. I think it's possible, yeah.
Setting the bar high. You must be Dr. Kumar then.
I am, in fact, Dr. Kumar. But please don't call me that. Please, I don't like being called that, so do not call me that.
Fabulous, fabulous. And then also we have here Zi Alikhan. He is a queer, first-generation South Asian American, culturally Muslim theater director. And he is... He is known for having directed On That Day in Amsterdam and New York, where he was nominated for a Drama Desk Award and a Lucille Lortel Award. Also, his production of Sanctuary City at Pasadena Playhouse was named by the LA Times as one of the best of the year. He's directed the band's Visit. And also recently he directed You Are Cordially Invited to the End of the World by a playwright we all know and love, Keiko Green, at South Coast Repertory Theater. And Zi, actually, I want to also add that, Zi has been part of our world of directors. I tend to be approached a lot by people in the field to say, hey, have you heard of this person? They are wonderful to work with. Also, they're a fabulous director. And Zi was one of those people. So before I met Zi, I had a very good friend of mine say, you must meet this person and you have to get to know him. And so she set us up on a Zoom date to talk, and we hit it off pretty instantly.
We did, yeah.
And I was really in my head at the time, oh gosh, I really hope we can find something for this artist to come work at the Old Globe. And my goodness, tell us about the story of how the two of you came together to work on House of India.
It's kind of a great story. I was at the Olney Theater Center about a year and a half ago directing a play called The Nice Indian Boy by Madhuri Shaker. And my production stage manager was a wonderful person named Hope Villanueva. Hope also moonlights as the literary manager at the Bay Street Theater out in Sag Harbor. Deepak had sent his play in House of India they do a summer festival. It's a pretty quick turnaround. It's about 6 hours of rehearsal, and then you do a reading on Sag Harbor.
Which is really fast.
I was gonna say, but also, a day on Sag Harbor, not a bad day to spend. And Deepak was looking for a director, and through a Facebook post of all things, Hope posted, "Hey, I'm looking for a director for this play, preferably Asian American, preferably South Asian American." And I think I just posted like the this emoji. On her thing, and she connected us, and it was this amazing thing where we spent maybe 4.5 hours together because my dog ended up getting sick in part of our 6 hours. So we only got 4.5 hours of rehearsal, and then we sat next to each other on the bus ride out to Sag Harbor, and we did a reading of this play in front of maybe 25 people.
Truly
Truly
confusing.
25 people. But immediately for me in that moment, it felt like there was something not only in the world of this play and in how special the story it tells is, but also in our collaboration. I think our experiences and what brought us into this world is quite different, but there's something that's so shared, I think, in the ways that we prioritize like respect and generosity and care for each other and for our rooms. So
Yeah, and I'll just add, we have, whenever a playwright meets a director, you have to sort of meet them before you agree to jump into any process, regardless of whether it's 4 hours or, an entire production. And that first meeting, I think I knew, we didn't even really talk about the play much, but I think I just knew that we vibed and we had a good we had some sort of a good connection. We had a shared language, even though we'd never met each other before. And so I think that's something that has continued to be true as we've worked on this play.
Totally. Yeah. I was just going to say, like, the other thing that's true is, like, we're both huge nerds for musical theater. And I think when that happens, like, we can kind of default. And I think when you see the play, you'll see some of that just creeping in there. But it's a nice little default language for us, too.
Yeah. Deepak, when you were writing this play, did you feel pretty strongly at that point that you wanted a South Asian director?
Actually, no, I did not. The first director I worked with on the play was not South Asian. And to me, the idea had always been, well, I'll bring the cultural competency because I'm writing the words, and then whoever the director is whoever the director is. Eventually we'll figure it out. But I think there's been something so special in the fact that we both have like places into the play, and that has opened up, I think, our conversations about our own, our mothers and our parents and our shared experiences growing up here in this country as the children of immigrants. And I think that's been really special. It's been something that I didn't think that I wanted or needed for this play when I started, but I can't imagine it without. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really so special to us at the Globe. The choice to produce this play was very easy. For one thing, as many of you might know, several years ago we produced a musical called Come Fall in Love, also known as DDLJ, the musical. It's this giant, splashy, wonderful musical based on the original movie that was a big Bollywood hit. So big that even 30 years after it premiered in India, it's still playing in the theaters. Anyway, from that, we cultivated this audience that was so, I think, really just loved the fact that they were represented on stage. And we wanted to welcome them back. We wanted to give them something else. And they had supported Come Fall in Love so enthusiastically. So when this came to Danielle and to us, and we read it, we felt like it was the perfect story to present to not just that audience, but also all audiences, because there are such beautiful universal themes in it about family, about siblings, running a business. They're just wonderful, wonderful themes that we could all connect to. And so I wanted to ask you, Deepak, what inspired you to write this play in the first place?
Wow, I had no idea that was coming. Good segue. So I'll say a couple of things. As I've been asked this question a couple of times in the last several months leading up to this production, and I think I keep finding new things that have happened in my life that sort of answer this question. But I'll say a couple of things. So there are two things I think that happened all at once. The first was I was in the pandemic. I went home. I grew up in Michigan, and I went home to the house, not the house I grew up in, but with my parents. And my brother was home as well. And so it was the first time, I think, since I had left for college that our family unit was kind of back together. So, a decade plus after that. And we're all sort of defaulting back to our behaviors as we were when I was 18 years old. Mom is cooking and dad is, like watching TV, and I'm kind of ignoring both of them. It's sort of interesting how quickly we went back to those patterns. And I think there was something in the just stasis of it all, something in the boredom, something in the sort of me feeling like I'm not doing enough at home all of a sudden because I'm older and I have more guilt. I sort of asked my mom, okay, can I help you in the kitchen? And part of it was motivated by this fact that my mom was making this food. My mom made this food for me growing up my whole life, and I loved it, but I did not know how to make it. And so I sort of, sheepishly approached her and said, hey, can I learn how to make that thing, or can I learn how to make that thing? Which she was so excited about, because like it's an opportunity for us to connect on something, especially food, which is so important to my family. So in that process, I started to learn a lot about my mother. There's a thing that happens, I think, in your like late 20s when you start to see your parents as actually people and not just like as entities of, you know, these like people that just hang around. But you actually see them as human beings. And so we started talking about her experiences immigrating, her experiences just both in this country as like a working professional, but also the things that she feels like she never got a chance to do. And I learned that she'd always wanted to run a restaurant. Actually, that her thing in life that she feels like she's never been able to do because she has duties and obligations to her kids and then to her parents and then to everything else, was that she had to go and find some kind of a stable job, but she's always wanted to run a restaurant. So that's like seed kernel number one. It's like, okay, well, there's a restaurant thing in there. The second thing that was happening sort of at the same time in 2020 was, not to get too heavy, but there's like a bunch of racial unrest in the country, and I think I was starting to notice that there were a lot of South Asians in particular that were feeling both like a very complicated relationship to wanting to be a part of this thing, and also at the same time feeling like they were outside of it. And so I think part of both of those two things came together in some way to sort of shape the initial kernel of the play, which is at its core about family and a restaurant, but that like undergoes a serious problem. And I won't give away what that problem is, but there is a serious problem in the play. So yeah.
Yeah. And what drew you to? I mean, obviously you raised your hand and your emoji, but clearly you've struck a connection to the story as well. And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been interesting in my career so far is I get the opportunity to work on stories about South Asian people a lot, and typically what comes into my world, into my purview, is stories about people who come here, people who have immigrated to this country. And I think something that is so profoundly unique about this play is it is actually it's about the relationship between people who come to this country and the children that they have in this country, and about what it is like to straddle that kind of first generation American experience. I've never read a play that so deeply looks at that particular relationship. And I think something that I have always asked myself, as my mom just walked in the room, I think she's here somewhere. Yeah, she's right there. Hi. Something that I've always asked myself as a children of two immigrants is, what do I owe them, and what do I owe the sacrifices that they made and the hardships that they overcame in order to build a life here? What do I owe them, and what do I also then owe myself as I continue to take their story and move it forward into a next generation? And I think those two questions are so deeply rooted in this play in a way that I've never seen in a play before, and that feels so exciting to me. I also think there's something about this play. We have loved discovering this in rehearsal, that it is about a family where the parents came to this country from India, and it is also one of the most universally American plays I've encountered in a really, really long time. I will say, I don't mean to put you on blast, but Deepak was interviewed a couple weeks ago, and the interviewer's last question was, what do you hope people learn about India from this play? And he said that this play is about Americans. And I think that feels so profoundly important in the play to me. And I think what's so cool about the way he's written it is it really draws on a lot of like Western theatrical tradition in a lot of ways. I keep saying the play feels to me like if Kaufman and Hart, if like You Can't Take It With You and Uncle Vanya had some kind of intermediary space. And I find that to be so exciting for us to be able to see our families inside of these kind of larger pervading traditions of the Western theater canon. So yeah, those two things where I was like, I have to be a part of that. Yeah.
It's very kind.
I have to agree. I too am an immigrant. My parents are immigrants here. I'm Filipino. Both my parents are Filipino, and I connected so deeply to this family, and I think everyone will have a version of these moments. But I'd like to just share a moment where I felt so seen and also very just moved. So there's a moment where the matriarch of the family. Well, there are many moments actually in the play where she speaks Tamil, right?
Yeah, Tamil.
Tamil, yeah, and usually it's like an outburst or a comment on something, and that's something that's incredibly personal in the household. I know for me, if my parents say something in Tagalog, which is the Filipino native language, suddenly the filter goes away. And there's something very essentially pure about who they are in that moment and I'm just so grateful that I understand that moment. And they don't show it often. And it's there too in this play, those very precious moments where I'm starting to get a little emotional, but as immigrants, we sacrifice a lot to be here, and children, first gen, not necessarily as much as our parents, but there is this sense of where does your identity and your cultural connection go when you're here. And so to know that in this family, there are similar experiences in that intimate sort of sharing of food, of emotion, that there are recognizable moments that I see and I can point to and go, yeah, that happens in my house too, is so really just so moving, so moving.
I didn't know that. That's really sweet.
Yeah. And so now I have to recover from my emotion and move on to the next question. Tell us about and so the other thing I wanted to point out is that Deepak actually is a professor at UC San Diego, which was a happy coincidence. We didn't think he was a local playwright. It turned out he was. But tell us a little bit about your experience, since coming to the Globe. And I know this is your first time here, producing here, and also your first time directing here. How has it been for you, sharing this play and producing this play here?
You want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I guess it's just simply. There are so many people that work at this theater, which has been really pretty amazing. And I think what has been amazing is to encounter this robust sense of curiosity everywhere you turn inside this institution. Everybody is curious about the story at the center of the play and the story that we're telling and how it furthers the narrative of what the Globe is doing and how the Globe is accessing new communities and how the Globe is in conversation with people that maybe it hasn't been in conversation with before in quite the same way. And it's amazing to walk into the office. There's so many reasons for us to walk into the office and to get the sense that you feel like your marketing team and your folks who are working in the sound office and everybody who's in the prop shop and Kim and Barry and Bex and our literary team, everybody has great questions that are so curious about how to unlock this story and how best to tell it. And I think that has been a really special place to do a world premiere. Because it's actually made us look at so many different facets of the play. We've had to look at the key art. We've had to look at, we've had to think about how things sound in that space in a totally different way. This play was, I think, intentionally written for a proscenium theater, and here we are doing it in 360 degrees. And so that has really informed the way we've done it. And everybody has been so abundantly both generous and curious about how do we best do that work. And that has been really unique about being here.
Yeah, I mean, I echo all of that. And I'll say one more thing, which a word that was coming to mind while you were talking, which is the word trust. I think there is a world where a producing relationship looks like mandates from producer or can feel like mandates even when they're not spoken as mandates. And I feel like the experience here at the Globe has been, at least in my experience, has been one of a lot of curiosity and a lot of trust. Like if someone asks a question and I say or you say or we say, we don't know about that direction because here's how we feel, we're always heard. And then even if we're wrong, we're allowed to try it and fail and then go back to the thing maybe that we should have done in the first place. And I think that is a really amazing playground to be in for the kind of art that we're making, which is inherently collaborative and worth taking. It requires risks in order to find the right thing. And I think that kind of trust is something that has been really deeply felt here at the Globe, at least for me.
It's also so cool. Like, I keep joking about being at Camp Old Globe. Just like while we were in rehearsal, two of my college classmates who I haven't seen in years were starring in Regency Girls, and then a workshop happened of like that was written by my first roommate out of college, who I also haven't seen in several years, and then my friend is assistant directing All's Well That Ends Well, and and then a director friend of mine who I haven't seen again in years is directing one of the good ones. Like, it has been, you are just surrounded by people who are doing work, and that kind of inspiration all around you just ends up seeping into your process and makes you so excited to be at work in a pretty unique way.
It's true. I actually was thinking about that because I met Deepak a few years ago on a panel
On Zoom.
On Zoom about Baked the Musical, where myself and a couple other industry professionals got to talk to you about the piece. And so we met there. I also want to add that with Zi was the associate director for the band's visit on Broadway, and he worked with David Cromer, who was your mentor. And David Cromer is someone who we are, have a relationship with as a director, and he. It's just amazing to me that this community is actually quite small. And also this community, and particularly that the community that the Old Globe sort of, runs circles with is with some of the best artists in the business, which is really wonderful for us, which for, me and my colleagues, we get to work with these spectacular human beings. I actually want to go back to something you said, Zi, actually, both of you, to talk about the process of writing a new play, which this audience is very familiar with in terms of, you've seen a lot of new plays, but it's always interesting, I think, to know that the process for new plays can be different from piece to piece. And so I want to hear what it was, take us through sort of what did a typical day look like in rehearsal, playwright sitting there, director is there, you kind of come across a scene that suddenly you kind of hit a roadblock. What happens?
Oh my gosh, why are you asking us to do this? This is so funny. Okay, I'll give my version. So my version is I walk in on day one and I'm like, the play's done, obviously. There's nothing to do. It's perfect. The director's going to take care of it, and I'm going to sleep and nap during rehearsals. So that's what I come in with in day one. By the end of day one, I realize I don't know why they programmed this play. It's completely broken. Everything is wrong, and oh my gosh, the world is falling apart. I need to go home and work for 6 hours and rewrite the play and come back the next day and then have the same conversation with Zi and be like, so is it better? And Zi's like, well, there are things to work on. And then we go back and we do it again. So the first week, and of course, every process is very different. And this is, I should say, my first play and my first production. So obviously there's, I think for me, some learning in general about I have things that are like literary exciting, like themes and characters and all this stuff. And then you have to ask the question, oh, we have to put it on stage. And once we put it on stage, it's a totally different ball game. You can't sit for 5 minutes in the internal thoughts of a character because you got to get to the next event, and you got to get to the next thing. And I think for me, my experience inside of it was for the first week, a whole lot of rewrites, a ton of just those first 5 or 6 days was touching every single page of the play. I think by the end of this process, I will have at least rewritten some words on every single page of this play, which is astounding. And then you can also zoom out and, if you were to have access to the first draft from day one and the draft that you would see, you'd be like, yeah, that's the same play, but it's sharper, it's more focused, it's clearer, it's so many other things. So that was my experience, at least in week one. What was your experience?
Yeah, totally.
Yelling at me?
Yeah. No,
Okay,
I was
I'm
so
joking.
kind.
He was kind. He's very kind. He's very
nice.
kind. He's very kind.
I'm finding myself in a really unique chapter. I think it's weird to be sitting here because I am somebody who primarily directs the work of dead playwrights. I The thing that I primarily want to do with my life is musical revivals, like big musical revivals. And what's been strange is when we open on Thursday, I've been in California since January. I'm based in New York City. I've been in California since January, and this is my third world premiere play that's opened since January, which has been a really huge education for me to do 3 world premieres back to back to back. And I think one of the things that I've been really proud of in this process has been like the dramaturgy that we've both been able to do, and also the room that we've been able to build. I think a word that I always look for in a collaborator is rigor. I'm always looking for someone who wants to like meet me at a place of working really hard until we get to the thing. And we were lucky enough to do a workshop of this play here at the Globe in November. And I remember it was like essentially our first full day of working together ever. I took Deepak into the green room, and I was like, here is a 30-page section of this play that I don't think works, and here's why I think it doesn't work. And it wasn't a test, but it kind of was a test.
I was like, okay.
And it was this amazing thing where I watched him work. I watched his brain just start to motor in a way that was so inspiring to me. And the way that he worked harder made me want to work harder. And I think there was a way in which we do feed each other in that way. And I think and my mom hears all of my complaints about work all the time. I'm so sorry. One of the things that I have told her so much about Deepak, that our relationship is so deeply bound in mutual respect and trust of each other, and a sense of always working towards getting the best thing together. And so he has been really gracious in the way that I think he's trusted my dramaturgical mind, and also in the way that I think we've really sourced this room. Our actors have been such an active part in shaping this play. Danielle, who is sitting in that back corner, has been such an active part in shaping this play. Our designers have been such an active part in shaping this play. And that's the way I like to have a room.
Yeah. I mean, I think people think writing is just writing a play must be just the writer sits down and writes, and then everyone else does. And that's so not how I like to work. Also, I love collaboration. And something like theater, I feel when everyone in the room feels like they are all making the thing together and not being told, this is what you say now, and this is what you do now, and you stand there. I mean, even when you're blocking scenes, it's like, how does this feel to you? You're always asking that question. Even today in preview rehearsal, when we are restaging some stuff and moving things around, you're asking the actors, oh, how does that feel to you? Do you feel an impulse to do something else? And that's such an amazing, like, generous, collaborative thing that you do. And I think because you lead with that collaboration, and I feel I lead with that collaboration, we just bring a room together that feels like we're all in this with our and respect each other as artists and have our own point of view on the thing. And of course, it is my job to then take all those points of view, ask what my point of view is, and then go home and like figure out what to do about it. But I think all of that input has been very welcomed in this process, and I think that's made for, I think, a really cohesive thing, which is really nice.
Well, and the last thing I'll say is, like, I think one of the things about theater in the round is you will never be able to experience everything at the same time. You will never be able, in a proscenium, you can see a lot more at the same time. And so in the round, there's been this decentering of, like, I don't know, like, there's been a sense of we've all actually had to create the 3 dimensions in the 360 degrees together. I've had an amazing associate, Ambika Reina, who I don't think she's here right now, but she, hey. She has been quite literally a second set of eyes for me on this process, and we oftentimes will sit on opposite sides of the play happening and just be like looking at each other and noting each other with our eyes, and it's been really cool to be like, it is actually not important where the information is coming from, but like, how can we generate information as a room to hopefully make something that feels really alive when our audiences come there.
I have to say, the other night when I was watching Deepak, and you were sitting with your family over there, and in the corner of my eye, I could see Deepak doing this during the show. Not
So
watching the show,
distracting.
he's watching the audience, which actually I think is very helpful.
Yeah.
It's very useful. Yeah, you want to tell us about how that felt?
No, I mean, well, it was amazing. First of all, it was the first time that was first preview, so it was the first time an audience actually got to sit in on what we had been cooking for the last 4 weeks. So that was, I mean, surreal and amazing. But part of it, I think in that moment, I was like, oh, I think I am a playwright and not like another kind of writer, because I'm so interested in how the audience is experiencing the thing and not just like what I want, what the beauty of the words or something. And then I came back and I was like, I think this language doesn't sit right with me, even though I love the language and I wrote it, because this moment didn't land in this particular way with the people that were in the room. So I think that was both amazing just as a experience, but two, I think I was sort of having this out of body, like, oh, you're so interested in how people are experiencing this thing. I think this is like where you ought to be. So that felt nice.
I love that. Yeah, computer science can't hold a candle, huh? to
Computer science is fun too. Something's got to pay the bills.
I would love to open it up to our audience if any of you have questions. And I think we have people with a microphone to come down. We have a question down here, and we have a question up here. So we'll start here, and then we'll come to you. A mic is coming your way. There you go.
Can you give us a specific example of something when you read a play that you know won't work? And what's going through your mind?
Totally. Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I can.
Uh-oh.
I think Deepak and I have talked so much about you sometimes read a play and it is so thrilling, but it doesn't. So we've talked a lot about what is literary and what is stage worthy. And I think that has been a really important thing for me to understand as a director. Like, is it actionable for a person? Like, how does a person achieve a goal by saying that language? How does a person connect to somebody else by saying that language? Or if they are just essentially trying to speak to someone but having an individualized or personal and not connective experience, that's kind of pointing to the fact that it's literary. It was interesting, we cut some language today that I really love, because Deepak was like, this feels like poetry, and it feels like poetry that is out of the mouth of this character. And it was so interesting to have this moment where I was like, I love that language, but in your mind, that's not actionable. That person is not doing anything with that language. It just sounds really pretty. And I think that has been a really, especially in a play that this play feels like it is drawing from so many things. And I think Barry was the first person to like invoke the well-made play as it relates to this play too, thinking about Miller, thinking about Odette's, thinking about those kind of turn of the 20th century writers. And there's no fat on those plays. They are all about action. And I think that has been really useful for us to think about those plays and about how we take the kind of ornamentation off of the thing and make it so actionable in both funny and like heart-wrenching ways.
Yeah, I'll add a different example, which was something we discovered in the process of making this play. I won't give you the specifics, but when there is something that I learned, at least for this type of play, which is a very naturalistic play about a family that has a problem, right? Think of every other well-made play or whatever. But when the problem presents itself, if anybody's not talking about the problem, then it feels like, what are they doing? There's a problem. and that is something we really learned and had to sort of navigate, because it wasn't all of the play, but a good chunk of the play was, in day one, was a lot of really interesting character stuff and a lot of stuff that we felt maybe is useful color to the world and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't about the problem. And as soon as we got to the problem, it's like, oh man, anybody that's not talking about this problem right now is a problem. Like, it's totally not going to work. So, and interestingly, I don't know that either of us necessarily caught that at the table when we were doing table work. As soon as we stood it up in the rehearsal room, we were like, oh, wow, they're really not talking about this problem. And it's a huge problem. And we're in this space together. And the round forces you to think about that too. You can't hide. Everybody around you is all watching these two people.
Everybody wants to know what the problem is.
I know.
But you'll have to come see the
How many
play.
people, has anyone seen the play?
Raise your hand if you've seen the play.
Okay, so a handful of people have seen the play. Are people planning on? You should see the play. You should go see the play.
They're coming to see the play.
So you'll know what the problem is. It's very obvious what the problem is.
The last thing I'll say that I think is we learned about ourselves in this process, and I think what makes us a really cool team is Deepak is really interested in character, and I'm really interested in event. And so I think he renders people first and foremost, and I'm really interested in how the play moves from action to action to action. And I hope what we found is a good balance of event-driven people, or event-driven character exploration,
Or character-driven events.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Interesting.
We have a question over here. Oh, right here.
Hi. How do you hope this play will resonate in India? How do you hope? Is this a way for people in India to see how the Indians of the diaspora think and function? My husband was a writer. We are from Greek descent, and works that the Greek American community did had a big impact. It was the best way for the Greeks of Greece to see, the dialectic was super important.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. To be honest with you, really honest, I haven't thought about how Indians in India are going to would receive this play. Well, if you were asking me for a hunch, I would say some would probably be interested. But in a weird way, like so much, as I have said this before, so much of this play is not about the characters interrogating their Indianness. It is so assumed of the characters, and hopefully you'll feel that when you see the play. There are only, they are so, to some extent, comfortable within their Indianness and their Americanness, and they wear both of those things at the same time. And I think one of the things that was with a lot of intention was that I wanted to make an Indian American play, but also an American play, and really make it feel like an American play. So in that sense, like, for sure, I think Indians in India would be interested in this, but also potentially from the lens of like, what is America like, and what is America like for Indians? And so I think for sure there's some interest. There could be some interest there, but
Yeah, I also don't want to put Danielle on blast. But one of the things that she said to me that I thought was so useful was like, when I watch this play, I see the way that my giant Italian American family communicates with each other too. And I think like what is so beautiful about this play is it is so deeply specific to this family and and again, they're so seemingly comfortable in the ways that they practice culture, faith, all of those things, that they are able to have conversations that anybody can dive into. And I think it's not about like, that's not actually really, you can't do that in a generalized way. It's actually about getting so specific about the way that this family functions and lives. And yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
yeah, thanks for the question.
Only because of your Italian background, but if I go into an Indian play in the Globe Theater, I kind of wonder, is this another Indian play? And so, because of the Italian background, how do you broaden this to make it an Italian background or an Irish background or, an African immigrant background? Obviously, the label of the writer of the play immediately leans it that way. It's not a fault one way or the other, but think about it. How do you avoid the bias that says, oh, that's an Indian play? In America, how do you make it, how do you broaden it, or how do you take the label off of it? Famous Irish red-haired actress.
I just want to clarify that it's our director of new plays, Danielle Magisamato, who has the Italian background, not
That's
the
right.
gentleman
I
here.
do not.
He was quoting her.
Danielle.
He was quoting her.
I do not. I am not Italian.
Nor am
There
I,
is-
no.
There is no Italian. Yeah, I think I'm curious of your take on this too. Maybe I'm hearing two questions. So there's one question, which is, how do you avoid the bias? And to some extent, that's not a problem that I think a single play can solve, but I'll tell you what I like to think about is, how do I make it, and it's gonna sound counterintuitive, but how do I make it as specific as possible and as core to the human experience as possible? Right? I think part of what you can do with theater is you can say, well, yeah, sure, that's an Indian. You could say that's an Indian mother and that's an Indian daughter, but that's a mother and a daughter. And that mother and a daughter has a relationship. And that relationship, of course, is colored with all of the details of being South Asian or being Indian or all those things. But I think what I want people to leave the theater with is, I saw a mother and daughter tonight, and I saw mother and son tonight, and I saw a brother and a sister tonight. And those kinds of things, I think, when they're done one play at a time, start to untangle, I think, some of the inherent systemic biases that we have against, like, oh, that's the Indian play, and they programmed the Indian play this season because they needed an Indian, or something like that. So I think that there's some of those things that I think can help one play at a time and one sort of thing at a time. There is, I think, a second question in there, which is like, well, I guess both of those questions. The one question is, what do I do about it? And then like the second question is sort of about the bias. Part of the bias thing is like, we all got to show up, and like show up for plays that maybe you wouldn't show up for if you perceive it as, oh, it's just going to be that Indian thing, or it's just going to be that Chinese thing, or it's just going to be that other thing. And it doesn't even have to be racialized, right? Like, it's going to be like another cooking thing. They're just going to cook and talk about cooking all the time, right? Like there's so many genres of plays that are like, that don't have anything to do with race. It's another one of those family plays. It's one of those weird magical plays. Like, I don't want to, or those lyrical plays. Like, part of I think the joy of theater making is that we get to put all that stuff on stage and then trust that, like, well, a lot of people are working really hard to try and make it really good for you. So I think that's part of it. But I don't have a perfect answer to that question. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something similar. I think that the goal of, like, anytime I'm working on relationships, it's just about relatability within the set of given circumstances. I'm never thinking, how is this going to be relatable to specifically a South Asian or South Asian American audience, although that might be a secondary question. But I think it's about creating relationships that seem recognizable to everyone, because a mother and daughter and a mother and son and a brother and sister are relationships that many of us have had different versions of. And I think that, I always say that, like, theater making is, like, one of the most important jobs that we have as theater makers is to create pathways of empathy for people, so that when they come into our spaces, they can experience lives that are different than their own and get practice in hearing language and hearing ideas, so that when they leave the theater, they can go out and practice the things that they learned, and they can be more empathetic to people who live. We can be more empathetic to people who live differently than we do. And so I think, to Deepak's point, my hope is that we as theater audiences can go and see more plays that are about experiences that are different than ours, because I think it will make us stronger citizens, and it will make us actually not have to ask. This question is so valuable, and I hope that in 10 years we're not even really asking this question about plays, because we feel so empathetic towards all kinds of stories when we go to see them.
Well, when I think about one of the most American plays out there, right? A Streetcar. At the center of it is a Polish immigrant. Yeah. And, did people look at that play and say, oh, that's a Polish play? No, probably not. They remembered him saying, Stella, and then the relationship between the sisters and all of that. So I think in sort of checking our own biases, we can turn it around and look at, well, what are the things that we consider American? And perhaps there was something in that story that was uniquely specific to a theme or a ethnic group or a community, and realize that what is America after all if not a melting pot? So one more question. Oh yes, she's on the aisle right here.
So for both of you, now that the previews are beginning or in the middle?
We're in the middle. We're on preview 3. We have 4 previews.
So after each day during preview, what's going on after the play? I mean, because you are observing it in real time, an audience response, and I imagine there's some talkbacks that will be occurring this week. What kind of homework do you have?
Oh, we have homework, yeah. Immediately after the play, there is meeting where all of the designers and the director and myself and the theater staff and folks that are there, we sit down and we say, okay, what do we need to work on for tomorrow? And then that generates a big list. Sometimes those are writing things, oftentimes they're tech things, sometimes they're staging things, sometimes there's lighting and sound and design and all this stuff. And we make a big list, and then we come in the next day around 11:30 and we work the list, and we work the list until 4. And then we do a different show. So that's my version of it. What's your version?
That's pretty similar. And I think it's all about prioritizing and also understanding, like, there's a cost benefit ratio when you're in previews of what is going to be the best use of our time. Actors, I have so much empathy for actors because they are the ones that have to hold all of the new information in front of 300 people every night. And so, like, is it worth it to rewrite these 30 pages today? Or should we have done that last week? Or should we wait till the second production? Whatever that is. But yeah, that seems right. I think what's so cool about being at a theater like this that really champions world premieres is you could come 3 times in previews and experience change, like experience the growth of the play. And like if anybody's coming to see the play tonight, there are a couple new pages in, there is a little bit of new staging, there are things that are cut, there's new tech, like, there's a new costume piece, there's a couple new props. And if you came to see the play on Sunday, you wouldn't have seen any of that. And I think we feel really encouraged by the Globe and by our collaborators to keep finding the best version of the thing, and that's what previews are really for. So it's been cool. It's been very encouraging, and sometimes previews can feel very scary, and this process has not felt scary at all.
Totally, and our actors are champions. I mean, preview 1, I showed up with 30 new lines for an actor, and they were like, okay. But they killed it. So, yeah.
Well, I am very excited for all of you to see this beautiful play, and I'd like to thank you for coming tonight and to thank our guests for joining us for this conversation. Thank you, Deepak and Zi. Enjoy the show. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.